Welcome to our nightly look ahead to what the papers are bringing us tomorrow. We're joined tonight by the editor-in-chief of Cosmopolitan, Louise Court. Good evening, Louise. We're also joined by senior political correspondent at BuzzFeed now, Emily Ashton. Let's just have a look at some of the front pages before we look at the stories in detail. First of the front pages in tonight, The Independent, which claims the CIA interrogated terror suspects on the British-owned island of Diego Garcia. Qatar Airways' purchase of a 10% stake in the owner of British Airways leads in the FT. The Mirror has the story of a woman who was told that she was genetically a man and had no reproductive organs. The paper reports she's now given birth to twin girls. The Telegraph says thousands of us may be filling in self-assessment tax forms unnecessarily. Claims of backstabbing and rivalry in the royal household of Prince Charles, that's the Times lead. In The Guardian, the head of the Police Federation, which represents rank and file officers, is calling for all of them to be armed with tasers. And The Express says there's been a scientific discovery which could lead to treatments which would keep us healthier for longer. And The Sun reports that Gary Lineker is facing a £1.3 million bill after a crackdown on tax avoidance schemes. So, Prince Charles graces quite a few of the front pages tomorrow. There must be a biography coming out, and the Daily Telegraph, we'll start with that. Does it reveal anything coming from the book?
Well, I think the main reason it's on the Daily Telegraph front page is a nice picture of Prince Charles, and as you say, he's on the front of the Telegraph, the Times and the Mail tomorrow. There is a biography coming out by Catherine Mayer, a journalist for Time magazine, and Charles, the Heart of a King, it's called, reveals all about, you know, what he wants to do when he becomes king one day, packed with all kinds of strange little details. The Daily Telegraph go in on how Charles has discussed with the Queen the sensitive matter of what sort of king he should be, which doesn't really reveal an awful lot, but you know, shows that he's actually sat down with the Queen and actually had that discussion, because one day that will happen, and
I suppose
he's already preparing.
The whole thing that it might, you know, there's always talk, isn't there, that it could go straight to William, and he's clearly having none of that.
You can't blame
big
him.
Moment.
Yeah.
So.
And in some ways, as the Queen has reduced the number of public duties that she's carrying out, we've seen a lot more of Prince Charles, but we've also seen a lot more of Prince William as well. But he must be aware of public opinion. He must be perhaps concerned about public opinion, and there's a bit of that in the biography, isn't there, as well?
Yes, and there's also suggestions in the Daily Mail that he's going to transform the honours list. You know, he's going to, instead of having things like saying that for OBEs and MBEs, that empire's a dated turn, and that was something that was investigated a couple of years ago, and the Queen was quite adamant that she wanted it to wait until the end of her reign before such changes were made. So I think he's going to want to make some radical changes, because he's a very different character to his mother.
Well, let's move on to the Times, because the Times does go into a lot more detail. It gives us more of an insight into Prince Charles's course, I suppose, and of course, you know, we don't have to accept that this is the truth, but this is what's coming out of the biography. Give us a few more details. I mean, it's quite revealing. It seems a little bit chaotic as well. Well,
it's a great intro, isn't it, to the Times front page, with this series Wolf Hall that's on at the moment. It says Prince Charles' court is so riven by backstabbing and infighting that it is nicknamed Wolf Hall, according to a devastating new portrait. And apparently it's all about the way Charles allegedly treats his staff. You have sources talking about Charles's habit of expanding his age jurisdictions, meaning that some insiders are feeling oppressed by their changing job descriptions. It's all very dramatic.
And they also have a little bit of a dig saying, well, because he's never actually had a normal job in a normal office or whatever, he doesn't actually understand how politics works. So if you sort of suddenly expand someone else's role, that the person whose job that was, that the new person's been given, could be a little bit upset about it. So it does sound chaotic, but it also it explains that at some of his charities, that the rivalries between the different factions led to the collapse of a multi-million-pound deal to house his charities under one roof, and more than £100,000 was wasted. So it doesn't sort of sound very efficient way of working.
I think what I find most interesting, according to the Times that comes out of the biography, is his paranoia of what people think of him as well, not just his staff, but the public as well. And it gives you some insight, if it's to be believed, that there is an insecure future king there who's aware that, what you said earlier, Louise, that there are probably a lot of people in the British public that would like to see Prince William come straight in. He's young, he's fresh, he's different, and certainly a good people's person as well, and he's clearly concerned about that.
And you've obviously, you know, Prince Charles has caused some controversy in the past by writing letters to government ministers and trying to perhaps intervene in official policy that people...
And architects as well.
People don't really like him doing that. But yeah, insecurity is a good word for it. And as you say, William and Catherine are all over your TV screens, and Harry, they are the new cool royal family, and Charles doesn't quite fit that bracket.
Do you think we know Prince Charles more now than we used to? Because the royal family has opened out a lot more, particularly since the death of Princess Diana.
Well, we know bits about him, but I don't think you can ever, you know, obviously everyone knows he talks to his plants as well, you know, so you get that side of Prince Charles.
What's wrong with that?
Let's not go into it now. But so I don't think we really do, and I don't think, because he's been so overshadowed by his mother, I think it's really hard for us to know really what he's capable of, or for him to know what he's capable of. And I think that would explain part of his fear at the moment, as you say, if this is to be believed.
Yes, and if he has that fear, he's not going to be happy about the biography, I'm sure.
But that's why stories like this are so interesting, isn't it? Because you very rarely get this kind of access inside, you know, behind the scenes. So, you know, I can see why the Times would splash it on a Saturday.
Although there has been a lot of kind of fly-on-the-wall documentaries about the royal family and what they do now. We see an awful lot more than we used to.
He's more popular now than I think he was a few years ago, especially after the whole Diana crisis.
Yeah. OK, let's move on to The Guardian. Taser stun guns back in the headlines. This is because of Steve White, who chairs the Police Federation, believing that every officer should have one now.
I mean, this is obviously very controversial. He's saying with the heightened terrorism threats and the fact that they're not just going to be hitting prime targets. It could be anywhere. It could be in Cheam High Street, he says. So he's suggesting that every officer should be armed, but with tasers. But tasers are controversial. I think 10 people have died over recent years as a result of tasers being used. And it's sort of... I'm not sure really how much of a threat a taser is to a confirmed terrorist. And also there is the worry that it just ups the ante, doesn't it? If you know, the more officers are armed, on one hand, I'm sure if you're an officer walking the streets, then you may feel that you would want some extra security, but it does, if you're out there to break the law, knowing that officers have got tasers, will that mean that criminals will come more armed themselves?
Is it necessarily because of the terror threat that he wants to see every officer armed with a taser? Because
that's what he's referenced here. He says it needs to be expanded because of evidence of terrorist plans to kill officers who are traditionally unarmed. And there were those threats a couple of weeks ago. The terrorist ideal to get attention no longer relies on an attack being in a place of note. It could be in Cheam High Street, in any town, in any part of the UK. We know there are more dangerous people out there preparing to attack police officers, and we need to be able to respond to that threat.
Because one wonders if every officer is armed with a taser because of a terrorist threat, one wonders then, I don't know, a year in, does a report come out, you know, showing that tasers weren't necessarily used on terrorists, they were used on burglars or shoplifters, or and that will be the worry among organisations like Amnesty International, who are quoted in this, saying that there's no evidence that tasers would put a terrorist off anyways, as you say.
There's a lot of people out there that will just be nervous about their local bobbies walking down the high street with taser stun guns strapped to them. I mean, and whether that would ever put off a lone wolf terrorist from striking, I mean, that's the issue. Yeah,
we all want to be protected, don't we? And we've already heard from Bernard Hogan-Howe, the Met Police, and from the head of MI5 that we need more resources, we need more money, we need more protection, particularly after the Paris terror attacks. Where do you find the balance? It's
but
very
is it
difficult.
a question of more police and more eyes and more people being alert to things rather than just giving